How's everyone doing?
Doing good, getting
Well,
geared up for Christmas, working my butt off. It never ends. How about you guys?
6 inches of snow at home this morning. So
Whoa.
that was yesterday afternoon.
Yeah, we had slush fall from the sky.
Yeah.
That's about
Mm,
it. I'm returning from sunny Playa del Carmen, where I was
Oh,
last week.
okay.
That was fun. I had some trans activists try to kick me out of the Hilton.
in Playa del Carmen?
Yeah,
Really?
Yeah,
I did.
yeah,
Yeah.
Well, why don't you tell
yeah.
us about that? How did that go down?
Well, I was sitting with my family, all nine of us, like my brothers and sisters and mom and dad, and then the maitre d' comes up to me and is like, "Excuse me, sir, there's a problem. Like, there's a problem with you. We need to talk." And I'm like, "Whoa, no, we need to leave the rest. We need to go over. Oh, here, we need to talk. There's a problem." And I'm like, I'm more curious than anything. I thought, am I wearing sound? Is it because I'm wearing sandals? I'm in a pretty fancy restaurant and I'm looking at other people and they're wearing open-toed shoes. And so I get up and I go, and he goes, "Excuse me, sure, there's a gay patron, and they say that your t-shirt is disrespectful and hateful towards the gay community." So I look for the gays, and I'm like, there's no obviously gay people. And I said, "I'm gay, and I'm here with my husband." He's like, I know. I'm not asking you to, I'm not asking you to remove the shirt or to leave. I just need to be seen talking to you. So I was publicly shamed because essentially Annie Lennox and Prince had a problem with me. I looked over and it was a woman with a shaved head and a man in a dress who had a problem with my Gays Against Groomers shirt.
Oh,
Wow.
how dare you?
Yeah, and so that's funny. Like they're saying they're gay, and they like these spicy straight people have a problem. And like, what's your problem with Gays Against Groomers? Are you for groomers? Like, is that the problem?
Exactly. Good question. So
Yeah.
what was the solution? That was just he just needed to be seen
I
having a
needed I
conversation.
needed to be publicly shamed by the Hilton staff.
Mhm.
Whoa. Unreal.
Yeah,
Unreal. So this experience, this is covering
in
different nations,
Mexico.
this whole
Whew.
topic.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
that's incredible.
So I'm right away, of course. I know my girl Megan Murphy's on the west coast of Mexico, and so I text her, I'm like, "Megan, you won't believe it. I almost got kicked out of the Hilton." And she's like, "What?" She goes, "That's bullshit. Mexican people don't think like that. It's probably a turista." I'm like, "Yeah, it was a turista. I'm pretty sure they were from Canada." Um,
A
I didn't know
turista?
these people, but Gregory, my partner, went out for smokes with them, and I'm pretty sure they were Canadians. Yeah.
Mm,
Interesting. So everything was all fun and games, and you were
what a tourist.
friendly to be around until you wore a hateful shirt that simply says gays against groomers, which your question you pose is absolutely the perfect question. Well, if this offends you, then are you for grooming? Like, wow, unreal.
Yeah.
So Scott, what's your involvement in this topic? Are you a member of Gays Against Groomers?
Gays Against Groomers is only an American organization, but I support them. I'm
Right.
in a similarly named group called Gays Against Grooming BC,
Okay.
and I'm with another group too.
Okay.
But I don't talk about the other group that I'm in.
Okay, well, we won't ask any questions about that. But
Okay.
as far as being a supportive member of Gays Against Groomers and having your own group, Gays Against Grooming in BC, what's your stance then on SOGI?
You see, I don't like it. And it's not for the reasons that
Yeah.
it's not for the reasons people think it right. Like the activists are right. Soji isn't the problem. You have to go deeper. You have to look at the meaning of those words. Is sexual orientation effectively described? No, it's not. They're saying that
Yeah.
anyone can be anything anytime that they want. They've totally obscured it. So I look at Soji from a very fundamental level. It's like Yeah, I have huge problems with what's being taught, but the activists are right. It's not SOGI, it's the damn legislation behind all of it. SOGI is a stinky unicorn fart that even if we got rid of it today, another fart would pop up tomorrow because of the legislation and because of the destruction of the English language. That's my view on SOGI. We got a bigger battle ahead of us.
Absolutely. Well, you laid that all out
Yeah.
perfectly. And what about for you, Kellie? What's your stance?
They're not teaching what um like they did the whole thing in BC where they had the community, the stakeholders within the community participate in the creation of SOGI 123 and all of that. But what actually got enacted is very different from what they say. And um, I think most of what I'm hearing about is completely age inappropriate. Like, was it you, Scott, who listed the thing about Australia? They're teaching 6, 7, 8 year olds about hegemonic toxic masculinity.
No.
It's like, what? These are words that I had to, like, I'm 56, 57 tomorrow. I've had that wrong all year. And I had to Google the phrase to figure out what they were talking about.
Yeah,
Like,
what is
not
that
that
phrase? I've never heard it before. What is it?
it's the idea that if you have a penis, you're evil,
Oh,
and that you're inherently evil, and the way that you can become a good person is to get rid of your penis.
Whoa.
That's basically what they're teaching little boys. It's this concept that by being masculine, um, you don't cry, you beat up on other people, you're cruel to women, you're cruel to children, you're cruel to animals, because you have this XY chromosome and a penis. That makes you just basically evil.
what is this based on? Who has
I,
come up with this and why?
I smell some
It's
WPATH Standards of Care 8 behind this
yeah,
with
no doubt, eh?
the eunuch one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Kellie, do you want to just maybe give a little bit of background on who you are and why your voice is important on this topic?
I am now Detrans Alliance Canada, so I consider myself a transition regretter.
Okay.
At this point in my life, there's not a lot I can really do to um, detransition because the thing about permanent bodily changes is they're pretty much permanent. Um, I started transitioning back in 2004. By 2010, I left the Vancouver scene when I recognized there was a fundamental conflict between the way I look and my sexual identity, who I was sexually attracted to, that I had become completely invisible to that population. That was the beginning. I returned to long haul trucking, and there I really recognized that I'm not a guy. You know, despite the appearance, I don't have the experience. I don't have the motivation. I didn't have the socialization that men did. It's just it's a totally different world. And then it was just learning about SOGI and the things that are being taught to children. Like when I left the scene, we were celebrating the end of the mandatory surgical reassignment of children with DSD, specifically boys, because they used to automatically um, reassign them as female, right? They do the operations and the surgeries, remove the testicles, remove the penis, yada, yada, yada. So we were celebrating the end of that. And then when I hit the scene again in 2017, finding out that we're now celebrating the mutilation of a whole another group of children, it's like, how did we get there? Because we seem to have had a grip on the fact for a little while that the solution to the problem is acceptance.
Right.
And in permaculture, they talk about how the problem with the solution is it's free. Um, not specifically the solution to gender identity, but the other solutions to what's going on with our planet. And I think that that applies here. Like Scott Nugent talks about it a lot, like how much money the system makes off of every child that's transitioned.
That's right.
And the problem with the solution is it's free. If we teach children to accept themselves, we teach a boy, you can be a boy however you want to be a boy, but you're still a man. You'll still grow up to be a man, right? You
Right.
can be a man and express that in whatever way you want to express it. And if you're a girl, you're going to grow up to be a woman, and you can, as an adult, express that however you want to express that. Well, there's not a whole lot of need for therapy and as opposed to what's going on now, where I mean, we were talking about this briefly, the whole name thing, right? That's why I put out both my names, Kellie, which is my name, Kenneth, which is the legal name I changed to as an adult. So we teach this, Helen Joyce, I'm paraphrasing her, but we teach children this matrix of crystalline fragility. Like if somebody says no to you, or if somebody, oh my goodness, that person called me Sally, it's my mom named me, and I'm really hairy, right? Like, so rather than teaching resiliency, we're teaching fragility. And that
Yes.
is what I object to the most in the SOGI model, the way it's set up, is this idea that everything that is outside of you is what's important. When I spoke at the Million March 2 in Toronto, the CBC French interviewer was there from Quebec, and she asked me what my pronouns are. And I said, well, personally, I use I, me, my, myself, mine. However, I would understand if in a conversation about me, that would render the conversation meaningless if you were talking about me. So use whatever pronouns you're comfortable using describing me. But those are the ones I personally use. And I've never misgendered myself. I don't accidentally mispronoun myself, you know? So,
That's the perfect answer. Did she like that answer?
yeah, she was actually smiling. It was
Cool.
really cool. I was half afraid they were going to publish it, and then kind of hoping they did.
So
But
then
they didn't.
what's your take then on this human rights legislation that they've made where misgendering a person now goes against their human rights, and a person could be penalized for that?
It is so
I
oppressive. Go ahead, Kellie.
Oh yeah, I personally sent in money to support the woman out in Surrey, England, who had been arrested and charged with a hate crime for calling a man with a gender identity a man and he him online. And she was actually repeatedly arrested. So I was very glad when it finally got to court and the judge reprimanded the police for applying charges and the waste of the court's time. And he reprimanded the court in such a way that she can now sue the police for
Nice.
yeah, it was a very clear and open reprimand.
Good. So you don't support the forced language then. And what were you going to
Not
say
at
there,
all.
Scott?
It's absolutely oppressive. Like, who in history has done this? I mean, do Christians do this? Do I have to go around calling my friend Pierre child of God outside of his earshot? Like,
Right.
do I have to structure my language around theist language if I'm not a believer? I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous, and it's so oppressive. It's a terrible piece of legislation. I want to see, or whatever's propelling it. I think that there's plenty of legislation to protect sex-based rights, but for some reason, our tribunals are so completely captured.
Yeah.
If we all stand up, they can't take us all to tribunal.
That's right. I have mixed
Mhm.
feelings about it. Like for personally, I do not agree with the forced language, but I do have some adult transgender friends, and I refer to them as their identity that they live with today. And I don't have a problem with that, but I do have a problem referring to other people with their preferred pronoun if they have not gone all in. Does that make sense, sort of thing? Like
Mhm.
I'm not going to refer to somebody who is obviously a man as a woman if they've made no changes. To me, that's what is that? I don't even know what that is. That's a game I'm not willing to play. But if like I have transgender friends who fully live the transgender life, they're not on loudspeakers, they're not forcing people to have parades for them. And to quote what they've said to me is, I just want to go to work, come home, and walk my dog and be a normal person. And as far as I can see, they are a normal person to me. They're not forcing their choices on me. They're not forcing their beliefs on me. But when I am up against or in a conversation with somebody who's being forceful, my initial reaction is to be like, no, I'm not going to do that. And so that's where I feel torn, because I do have friends where I respect their identity, but then on the other hand, I don't want to play the like nonsense game, because I do recognize that there is a percentage of our population who live healthy, constructive lives as the opposite gender, and I don't want to discredit them, but I also don't like this trend that we are seeing, this trend
Yeah.
that is harmful. So how do you guys feel? Have you drawn a straight line, or are you?
No, I don't have a straight line at all. I mean, I don't like, the thing is, I don't like being compelled. You can use whatever you
Mhm.
want, but if I may, the problem comes if I'm being corrected. No thanks. The problem comes with, okay, I have a social understanding with maybe some people, but let's say that the person you mentioned is walking their dog and I'm with a little kid, and the little kid properly sexes them. Do I correct that child? No, I think that's abusive. I think that it's abusive to compel a child to not properly see sex when it's so evidently there. I like,
Mhm.
especially with all the social coercion that they already experience.
Mhm.
So, and too, like, always get into it with Buck Angel because Buck gets mad when people want to call him her, but Buck's gone around with his vagina everywhere, like in adult entertainment. And like, it's not fair, but to me, that Buck would make me compel me to say that and then be really hurt.
Right.
It's complicated. There's a lot of nuance there, and I really try to
Mhm.
separate. If someone says they're transgendered, then I think they're buying into the religion. If they identify as transsexual, then I know that they kind of have a reality that's not based on that religion, that religious ideology that I oppose. And as long as they're not correcting me for something, I can try and give them accommodation. But if I'm
Right.
not being corrected, that's where I draw the line. I probably wouldn't be in a friendship with a person who corrected me.
That's, yeah, and that's kind of where I'm at too. Like my friends, they aren't correcting me, they aren't compelling me. They're completely what I would describe as normal personality, understanding, caring people. They're against SOGI. They don't even participate in Pride anymore because it doesn't represent what it used to. What I am being told, like I'm a heterosexual white woman, but what I'm being told from people in the Pride community is they don't want anything to do with Pride anymore. It doesn't represent what it used to. Pride succeeded in its goal of acceptance on a mass scale, and now it's just gone too far, and they no longer support modern day 2023 Pride. And
Mhm.
I'm seeing that more and more. And then when you look even online, on Pride parades, and you see what's going on down the main drag, and you see police officers saying, like, yes, I know it's indecent exposure, but not on today. It's like, how is this computing to anybody? How is any of this
Mhm.
acceptable? And how come the moment I speak up about it as a heterosexual white woman, I'm deemed a bigot, I am hateful, I'm homophobic, I am all of these awful names that, the part that really upsets me is these names they hold weight. They used to mean something. We have real victims who have suffered at the names of these words, and to misuse these words, in my opinion, is re-victimizing people like Matthew Shepard all over again when he's a victim of real homophobic behavior. Me standing up and saying, I would rather you not teach my 8-year-old how to give a blowjob is in no way homophobic behavior, and I am crucified for it. Like, the role that I have taken in Mums Against the Norm, the group that I am the spokeswoman for, I get so much flack that when I get out of my car to go into a public place, I make sure that my phone is on camera mode, because so many things have happened to me that I have to make sure I'm recording everything, because I've been spat at. I've been called the C word in front of my 2 children, which was a wonderful drive home trying to explain to them what that meant. And then at the same time, the people who are treating me that way are claiming to be the victim. And it's like, how do we get into this delusional state where I'm being completely reasonable? I'm working really hard at not getting frustrated and overreacting here, because I feel like I'm being antagonized and pushed to my absolute limit. But it's hard to have a reasonable conversation with these people. And I'm really thankful that both of you have sat down with me today, because you're living the experience. You know exactly what I'm talking about here, and we are sharing an opinion. And so it's good. This will be good to get this video out to the public, to show people that a person who has gone through transition, a person who is a gay man, a successful, happy gay man, can sit here and say, I don't agree with these teachings for our youth. This is a problem. And so thank you to both of you for that, because for the most part, anybody who speaks up, they're just instantly labeled as hate-fueled, and it's so frustrating.
And you're getting it worse because you're a woman, a real woman. But and I'm sorry that that's happening to you, but that's why they hate women and they hate gay people. And I'll clarify that for a minute. I know, like you're saying, you get this as those meanings, those insults like homophobia don't mean anything anymore, because Pride Society has banned lesbians who determine their sexual attraction by sex. We're considered hateful bigots. And they've been ousted from the Dyke March. If you look up the Vancouver Lesbian Collective, they do quite a bit of work on about exposing that. But no, if I say if I say women can't be gay men, hate out.
Yeah.
And I too, since the marches, since the union got involved in slandering and amping up hate, I have to get my phone out too, because I'm met with hostility in my own community because there's a target on me. I used to be a trustee in my union, and they all showed up there with masks and black. I don't know who they are, but now they know me, because I spoke with a trans woman against SOGI, was painted as hateful, walked through the crowd of them, hurling insults at me, transphobe, homophobe. And now whenever I go to the store, people look at me and I'm like, oh God, they're coming at me. I'm either going to get thank you, not usually, or I'm going to get, how could you, how dare you? Like, doesn't matter who I'm with, but if I was a woman, it would happen way more.
Yep. Yeah. I get quite often, are you Emily Duggan? And I always have this moment where I have to take a deep breath and go, maybe, because I don't know which way it's going to go. And I'm like, usually I'm sitting down. It's like in a restaurant scenario or something. And I'm always like, oh, I don't want to get spat on while I'm sitting down. Like, it's very uncomfortable. But yeah, it's interesting how the pushback is. Now, the argument for why we need SOGI is because it's important for LGBTQ plus children to see themselves in society. So my take, I'm a mother of 2 small children. I was a child once myself. And my opinion on that is children do not have a sexual orientation. You do not have a sexual orientation until puberty, is my opinion on that. And so to be teaching this to children is just absolutely wrong. It's the definition of child sex abuse, which is introducing adult sexuality to children before they are ready. and before children are ready is before puberty. So the argument is that it will be keeping children who identify as LGBTQ safe. Now, your experience as a gay person and as a detransitioner, looking back on your childhood, would SOGI have made your childhood safer in the school atmosphere?
No, I would have transitioned. I would have no fucking clue what gay meant because they define sexual orientation as they define sex as subjective. So there would be no clear guidelines. I remember waking up as a kid thinking it'd be easier to be a girl. I tried actually forcibly removing my genitals. Like, I didn't end up in the hospital. I just scratched the surface. But I mean, no, it would have been absolutely terrible. And then it would have sexualized me, and I was already sexually interfered with. I would have been a sexualized kid with no idea I was gay because they can't clearly define that. It doesn't help LGB at all.
No.
And even it creates it creates a sense of sexual trauma and disassociation what they're teaching because it's not based in reality. I think it actually creates it more. It's so damning.
I agree. What about with you, Kellie?
The pedophiles in my life, my mother married a pedophile, a convicted pedophile in 1969. They would absolutely loved it because they would have lost their fear of children outing them based on sexual knowledge. Right. So very much so he was a social sexual predator. He sold my sexual services up until the age of 8 years old. So his clientele, himself, they would have felt far safer because they wouldn't have been afraid of word knowledge. Like,
Right.
I specifically told to not refer to a man's penis as a penis, but as a pee-pee. And, it was very much making sure I used child language.
Right.
And didn't use adult sexual language, even though that's what I was hearing and stuff like that.
Thank you for pointing that out, Kellie, because I've had numerous conversations with some BC registered clinical counselors on this. And one of them has said to me is SOGI is a gift to every pedophile in every community across British Columbia because it does all of the legwork for them.
Yes.
And you have just explained something that is incredibly crucial for people to understand, is that in the past, predators would do just what you've explained. We don't call it a penis, we call it a pee-pee. And now having these books in our schools, like It's Perfectly Normal, for example, where they talk about things like butt plugs, how to properly give blowjobs. And then we have public health nurses handing out the ABCs of sex. There's a card there, F, felching. What child needs to be taught that?
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
No.
I didn't know what that word meant till I was 40, and I didn't want to know what it meant.
Right, instantly, if you could forget what that meant.
Know what that means.
I'd gladly not know that.
Yeah,
I was up until probably 12, 13. I was slapped if I said the word blowjob in like if my mother's husband heard me say blowjob, he would slap me, or he'd punch me somewhere where the bruise wouldn't show. Like, yeah, it was completely inappropriate to use that word because how would I know as a child what that was? Like, age relevant, and anal sex or any reference to anal sex of any sort, that was.
So that goes right against the argument that these activists are using, that knowledge is power. If we give these kids these knowledge, it will protect them. They will know what to stay away from. No. It actually safeguards the predator because now the education system is responsible for teaching these terms, not them. So they've just been given so much more space to get away with it. That's an incredible point, and I'm really happy that you made that. Thank you.
And what it really does is that it destroys the boundaries between the sexes. I mean, little boys always stood a chance of being attacked by homosexual pedophiles, but we know most people are straight. And now you have little girls who have to come to terms with the female penis and accept that as normal. And you have
Oh
people
yeah.
like Carrie Isham going around saying the that females have penises, and now in the past you might have had that creepy Uncle Larry. Well, now creepy Uncle Larry, it's okay for her to be in the change room with you, and oh well, that's
That's
just the
right.
penis. Oh, penises just get erect. Like it's removed that
Yeah,
barrier in and the social contract between the sexes, and it absolutely exploits young women more than it does men, and it's horrific.
Mhm.
Like
and
changing the perceptive, that's not a man. I mean, not trusting that gut feeling that every a girl or woman has, it destroys that. That's fucking abuse. Sorry, I'm
absolutely.
getting mad. I'm
I'm
getting
sorry.
mad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's like my daughter, I don't let her go into the change room at our public pool
Good.
by herself. And she's old enough to swim in the pool without an adult. She doesn't need to have me 6 feet away or whatever the rule is. She's old enough to go off and be on her own, which I mean, in theory, would make you think she's old enough to go in the change room, get her bathing suit on, and get in the pool by herself. However, I will not allow that to happen because I don't need my minor in a change room in a position where a biological man can come in fully intact and get naked. I'm 36-year-old woman, and if I was in a public change room and turned around and a dong was staring at me, I would be incredibly uncomfortable. Incredibly. I can't imagine what a teenager or even a young child will feel. That is insane. And so my child, she doesn't go into public change rooms or even restrooms alone anymore. And as a parent of multiple children, that can pose quite a challenge, but safety is
Yeah.
number one. And the environment that we're living in right now for women and children, with this trans ideology being pushed so forcefully on us, it does not leave us a safe environment when we go out into public. I don't feel good about it. There's a night there that
No.
I wasn't feeling well, and I was worried I wouldn't be feeling well enough to get my daughter to her swimming lessons. And so I was instructing her dad, like, you've got to go in with her and take her into the family change room and just be a presence in the room.
Yeah.
And so like he's game, he's absolutely okay with doing that, but I was like so stressed out, like, please, you have to promise me you're going to do that. And he was like, absolutely not a problem. But it's like that's the situation that we're in now. Like I have anxiety sending her without knowing that she's going to have a bodyguard. That is crazy.
Yeah.
That is not what women have fought for over the last 200 years.
And if you did
No.
encounter that, and if you complained, the cops would be at your door. And that happened
That's
here in
right.
Nanaimo. Someone came in just with a pronoun proclamation and perved their heart out. Perved and perved and perved for weeks until they met my friend Janaea.
Janaea, she's a marvelous human being, that woman. Oh, yes.
Mhm.
I am so proud of what she did. Good for her. Yes.
Yeah.
And the cops came for her and tried to entrap her about, like, just kept questioning how she got him out. And then when I stood up with her at the aquatic center, the cops came for me. I had to lawyer up.
Isn't that crazy? Like that's, I don't know what else to call that other than crazy. But this, and then we have activists forcing us to suppress our feelings to accommodate that of a stranger's. That of a stranger who most definitely has some sort of mental illness. And I don't say that as a negative. Everybody has some sort of diagnosis. But the fact of the matter is that these people probably have a diagnosis that puts them in a situation that is unsafe
Men.
for, yes.
Men. We can call them men. We don't need to call them these people. It's always men who do it. It's men. This is a men's right movement. This is a predators' rights movement. Pride is no longer LGB. It's predator rights.
That's right. Thanks for saying that. I'm going to start saying that too, because I absolutely agree with that. And then what do you guys think about the transgenders in sports? Let's talk about that for a minute.
I don't think men should be competing with women. Go ahead, Kellie.
I prefer the term men with gender identities in women's sports because that clarifies the confusion of putting trans and woman together, because then that confuses people, because then it's like, oh, you're talking about some category of woman. No, we're not talking about any category of woman whatsoever. We're talking about a category of men. who
Yeah.
have gender identities. Some of them have feminized their gender expression. Some of them haven't bothered at all. Um, but it's a category of men, and there is also a category of women who take testosterone who are competing successfully in men's sports. But I can tell you all about how to oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Fake your results with your testosterone levels, right? How to manipulate testosterone
Right.
levels so that when you're showing up, you know you're going to show up for a test, that you make sure it's low. That's not hard to do. Um, we were taught how to do that in our support groups, you know, for people who wanted more testosterone, or you can get testosterone for your friends by manipulating your testosterone levels and making sure they're low
Whoa,
whenever
no
you take
way.
a blood test.
No way. So
I never did
Oh,
you
that.
were taught how to do this?
oh yeah, they talked about it in the support groups. Because this is back in we're talking 2006 to 2010, when people actually had to go through an assessment process. So it's like, oh, okay, so you just skip your you skip your injection for the 2 weeks before you're going to go in for your blood test, and then your testosterone levels will be low, and you tell your doctor that, oh yeah, you're taking your normal testosterone levels, so then he'll prescribe you more, and then you'll have enough to share with your friend if your friend
Well,
is
isn't that
having
a
trouble
fancy trick?
passing
Wow.
passing the assessment process. Yeah.
Unreal. So, okay, so back to sports. Um, Personally, I was an athlete in high school. I was captain of my
Mm,
basketball team. It was very important to me. I wasn't big on academics, but I showed up every day for school during basketball season. And
yeah.
I would have been absolutely devastated had I lost my position because a biological male decided that they wanted to be female and took my spot. And I would have, because my body compared to a male body, it's not as good, and in physically, in a sports sort of way. And so for me, watching these girls, like girls who are athletes who love their sport, they put everything into it. They don't go to
Hmm.
parties. They're not hanging out on the phone with their friends till midnight. They're making sure that they're carbing up before games. Everything about everything that they do in a day is for their sport. They're an athlete.
And that
And
starts in sixth grade. Yeah.
yeah, it starts. I mean, some gymnasts start when they're 2 years old. It is a
Yeah.
lifelong commitment for some of these athletes. And to have these women put their all into it, and you can just see it when they're performing their sport, that they're in love with what they're doing. And to have that taken from them, the position taken for a biological male, and then there's not just the position, but the accomplishments, the trophies, the acknowledgments that go along with being the best in your sport, are all being robbed from us. And so then you have to ask yourself, what happens in all of our women's sports if 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 males identifying as women come in and take those? It's no longer women's sports. So what's the point in
Exactly.
having men and women's sports?
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, women don't even have representatives at federal government level anymore. It's now Minister of Women and LGBTQ LMNOPs.
That's right.
And you've lost all your work equality stuff too, because any man can just get a pronoun on, or be non-binary or gender fluid or whatever, and take whatever opportunities women have. Just
Absolutely. it's
And
it's heartbreaking.
the information that's being released from East Germany, like how there was always the question, how did the East Germans manage to, because it was obvious, like in swimming and some other sports, that the women had been taking testosterone. Everybody assumed the women had been taking testosterone. So the way they did it is, in their research studies, they took young girls pre-puberty, so they'd start 10, 11, 12, and they had two cohorts. They took mediocre girls and girls who were really good at sports. They split those two groups up randomly. One group had no testosterone. One group had testosterone. They all put it. They did 4 cohorts for 4 years, running concurrently, and they found that by putting a biological girl through a male puberty for 4 year period of time, for the rest of her life, she would outperform a mediocre girl would outperform the best in her field in whatever the competition was, even though she never took testosterone again after the age of 14, 15, or 16, depending upon the age when they started.
So just to get through the puberty is enough.
I didn't
to make a
realize
difference.
this experimentation had been going on as long as like back to like when there was East Germany. So I guess that's like that's a while ago. I didn't.
They started doing the research they started doing the research in the 80s. They applied it in the 90s, and that's why they dominated female sports for the period of time that they did. And specifically, swimming was what one person was talking about. But yeah, so it's known that no biological female, even if she's the best of the best in her field, can compete with a male.
That's right.
Period.
And that's not putting her down. That's just facts.
That's just the difference of the testosterone on the physical body.
That's right. Now, just switching to a new argument here, the activists' narrative is we need to be giving adolescents who identify as trans hormone blockers or puberty blockers or testosterone or whatever it may be to intervene to help their mental health so that they're not traumatized by going through their biological puberty. So that is the narrative on why we must intervene with adolescents. And my argument is, how could a 12-year-old possibly know what they want to be when they're in their 30s, 40s, 50s?
It's worse. It's worse than that.
Yeah.
I'm hearing the voices of detransitioners. Just give me a sec. And they're sitting in the therapist's office with their parents, and the therapist is telling them, if you don't let your child live as the other sex, they'll kill themselves. And this is the first time this child has no experience with being suicidal.
Right.
This child is now being told by the therapist, because you're not typical of your sex, if you don't live, then you're gonna off yourself.
That's insane, because I'm very much female. I've always been female, a tomboy, absolutely, as a young child. And still, even now in my 30s, I consider myself a tomboy, but always like very much female at the same time, if that makes sense. And if SOGI had been around when I was a teenager, I would have jumped on the train, because puberty was so uncomfortable for me. Because as a young girl, the first day I got my period, I thought I was dying. And then I was horrified to find out that that was normal and I wasn't dying. And so when they're saying that, oh, puberty is so uncomfortable for these kids, I think to myself, puberty is so uncomfortable for everybody. I have never met a human being who thought, oh yeah, puberty, that was a cakewalk, no problem. I mean, who had a good time during puberty? It's confusing. You got bad skin, you got mood changes. You're like, it's all uncomfortable, and yet we all made it through it. And so now why are we using that as an excuse to surgically and medically intervene on these kids who haven't the experience or knowledge to be making these changes?
My bones used to ache. I remember that because I grew so much and so tall. I remember just lying that was the most uncomfortable part for me, just throbbing and throbbing. Like almost like how my arthritis feels now. Like it was just really terrible. But I'm not as kind. I don't say that that's their point of view. I would say that no, that's abuse right there, and nobody is born in the wrong body ever. That never happens. Um,
No.
It's literally
so I wouldn't
impossible.
I wouldn't
Yeah.
even give them that respect of having a point of view. That's just wrong information. No one is
And
born in the wrong body.
I
the
agree with that.
research that's out there that shows how Lupron chemically it chemically castrates people. It children who start Lupron prior to puberty do not develop adult sexuality.
That's right.
Period. Because the
It
pathways in the brain don't develop. It completely halts that neurological development, and it's a one-way road. Puberty only goes one direction. Once that has been gone through, there's no restarting it to
right.
create those changes in the like the brain is plastic. There's neuroplasticity in the brain. However, there's not the cascade of events that will drive those changes to happen in the brain that they can then develop an adult sexual experience.
Right. So like an adult sex drive is what you're referring to. Sort of, yeah.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all bad as far as I'm concerned. I don't understand why anybody would think that that is a healthy route to take their child on. And yet here we are. Families are doing it all across North America. We
Yeah.
have there's a student that I'm aware of in Nelson, British Columbia, who just had top surgery, not graduated from high school yet. Like
Correct.
who, like for me, I've started saying, I think we need to start asking the question, what is going on in these kids' lives to make them think that they are in the wrong body? What is going on in these homes for these young people to have such disdain for themselves? Like, what is
Mm-hmm.
going on in the parenting? Like, what is happening here? Is there parenting happening? Or is everybody just living in the same house? Like, who's looking out for these kids emotionally? And how come when somebody finally starts paying attention, the emotional support that we're giving them is to hate themselves? Like all the no space for hate that is going around in the ally community and the LGBT plus community, the no space for hate is just so hypocritical because they're turning around and they're teaching young children to hate themselves.
Oh,
My
Yeah.
youngest is 4 years old, and if you ask her where she came from, she will smile and tell you how she got to our house on the Polar Express from the North Pole because she's actually a Christmas elf. And we don't crush her
Yeah.
imagination, but we also don't encourage her to believe that that is true. We let her tell her big story, and then we sometimes will be like, oh, that must have been really fun. Tell us about the train ride. And then we watch her imagination go a little bit more. But at the end of the conversation, we always finish it with, but you know you're a human, right? And she goes, oh, yeah, but I wish I was an elf. Because there is a difference between
Yeah.
wishing you are an elf and actually being an elf. And it's our job as parents to make sure that our young person that we are responsible for knows that there's a difference between wishing and reality, between
Yes.
wanting something and reality. I have started telling my children all of the time, because I have two, and so quite often I get that's not fair. And I've started telling them, fair is not real. There is no such thing as fair. You get what you get and you don't get upset and you make the best of it. Like
Yeah.
that is what I've started telling them, because I'm seeing that fair is this unattainable goal that people are trying to reach. And it's just, when you think about fair, it's totally unattainable. And so I've decided I am not going to teach my children that fair is real. It is not real. I'm so tired of this
Come
fair
on, yeah.
argument. Like,
I
and that's what
I
I think
didn't.
of.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kelly.
I didn't learn about that until my 30s when I got into recovery, and their comeback to that's not fair is, would you want this world to be a place where children are starving because they deserved it?
Oh,
And I'm like, and they're like, the world is not fair.
No.
I was
Wow.
like, yeah.
Yeah. So Kellie, you have experience because you're a detransitioner. So the statistics so far, they're slowly coming in because in all of reality, this trend or movement hasn't been around for a significant amount of time. And so we really are the data. And so what they're saying is transitioning minors during puberty, before they're adults, is saving lives. But what we're starting to see come out of the data is that actually people are transitioning, and then in the following 10 years is we're seeing they're either detransitioning or they're committing suicide, or they're detransitioning and then committing suicide. And so with your personal experience, and I'm sure you've got acquaintances or friends that are also detransitioners, what are you seeing to be the truth in that?
What we're seeing is a exact mirror of the research that was the longitudinal study that was produced in the early 2000s. And I can't remember if it was Switzerland or Sweden because I'm dyslexic. So without
Yeah.
looking it up, I get the two mixed up in my brain. And that study said exactly what you're talking about. It was a study of adults. It was over a 30-year period, longitudinal study. They found that suicide began to peak 7 years post final surgical intervention, and it remained higher for the rest of their lives, and that many lived out their life, disappeared from the community scene because they realized they'd made a terrible mistake and just reconciled themselves with living out the rest of their lives with this mistake that they had made. Um, the response in the activist community, and this was organized worldwide through WPATH, and it was to start writing letters to the ethics committees of all of the universities around the world. We started with the big ones, and the key phrase was that we were requiring them to desist from engaging in research that served only to pathologize and stigmatize an already marginalized and vulnerable population. The
Those
response
are
of the
some
activists
fancy words
the
just to make.
response of the activists was to make sure no university would fund research that would replicate that study because they were convinced that if the research was done, it would be revealed that these interventions were not helping the majority of people.
Right. And they're not. These interventions are not helping the majority of
No.
people. And the part for me as a parent that really upsets me with SOGI and gender identity and even queer theory in our public education system is that as a parent, all of these ideas could be being taught to my child without my knowledge. And then my child could be set on the path of transitioning without my knowledge. And by the time it becomes my knowledge, there are zero supports for me as a mother.
Yeah.
I'm not allowed to mourn the loss of my daughter. I'm not allowed to have any sort of voice in it. And then on top of that, there's no supports for her sibling. There's no supports for extended family. And so they're saying it's all for inclusion and diversity purposes, except for where's the inclusion? Who is included in this?
It's absolutely ugly in divorce battles. It's absolutely ugly in divorce battles because one parent will start transitioning the child, and then that's going to be the parent who gets custody.
That's disgusting.
Yeah.
And if you both disagree, then ministry will go and trans your child and take them away.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that was the choice. That was the landmark decision that came out. That decision came out this year in BC, where the father won the right to refer to his daughter as she and to return home because the parents made the decision. The wife stayed with the daughter and complied with what the ministry was requiring. The father left the home, left the marital home, and
Went to
was the
jail.
parent who
Went to
went to
jail. Yeah.
jail and was the parent who took on the responsibility of fighting the process. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
was a child who was transitioned because she was hanging out as a teenager. She was hanging out with teenage boys
Right.
because she had a crush
Wow.
on a teenage boy. Yeah.
Now, Scott, from your perspective, so as a gay man, when I think of transitioning minors, people with very little life experience, people who don't know who they are or who they're going to be in the next 10 years, they don't even know where they're going to be next week, let's be honest. And now we have government institutions and people in trusted positions in our lives come in, and they're taking these kids who are most likely probably just gay, and they're saying, oh no, you're not gay, you're a woman trapped in a man's body. Now, in my opinion, I see that as a form of conversion therapy, that
Mm-hmm.
gay children are, or not children, but adolescents are being brainwashed into believing a lie that is converting them into a transgender lifestyle. How do you feel about that?
I would say that's 100% accurate. And I would say that any therapist who wanted to help someone who maybe thought they were gay, like an adolescent, because I'm really skeptical to put that label on any child that they're LGB, right? But if they know that they're non-conforming, and if they know they might have some like homosexual tendencies, for sure it is. It is streamlined medical conversion therapy against gay kids and tied the hands of therapists to explore that.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I've had
I
therapists.
came to I was just blindly supporting that. Oh, yay, conversion therapy bill. But right near the end of it, I read the damn thing, and I contacted every one of my senators to try and be like, do not pass this, do not. And only one of them got back to me, Senator Don Plett, leader of the opposition, and he's like, yeah, he was in agreement with me, and but there's really nothing they could do. They passed that with very little debate.
Yeah.
Even Polyev, like, damn him, damn him. How dare
Mm-hmm.
he come out and say, oh, the radical. I'm like, no, Pierre, you fucking voted for it. You didn't
Yeah.
say a damn thing. You let it happen. The only one who did was Derek Sloan. He said,
Yeah.
this is going to create a medical system that's going to transition these kids. And he stood up for us, but no one listened because Derek Sloan had traditionally been against marriage equality. So all of us had blinders on. We don't want to listen to Derek Sloan, but Derek Sloan was right on the money.
Isn't that the way? Oh, that's frustrating as heck. Okay,
Yeah.
well,
My own MP blocked me. Now I've been an NDP supporter all my life, and I like tried to contact him. No, I'm blocked. Sent off to Randall Garrison, who's like the critic for LGBT LMNOP things.
so what do you guys say to people when, like, you're like a gay man and a detransitioner who was once a transgender person, when people tell you that you're wrong or you're hateful or you're a bigot? Or if somebody calls you homophobic or transphobic, like, how do you take that?
I don't converse anymore because it's never a good faith discussion.
Okay.
No.
And I don't come out to people anymore. I feel afraid because I know I'm going to get blamed for all of this, and I have no choice over it happening. I don't want people to think I'm aligned with that. Like,
Right.
I'm about way more in the closet than I was. I didn't know.
That's a good point. Thanks
I
for bringing
don't
that
want
up.
people to know because I don't want to be put in with those groomers.
Well, that's another really nasty side effect of SOGI and all this gender ideology and queer theory in our public schools is now it's like original pride worked so hard to get to a place of acceptance, gained that, was there, and now it's gone pushed to a place where now everyday people they don't want anything to do with it. They don't. And so it's putting people like you in hiding again, because just like what you're saying, you don't want to be associated with the grooming, with the predatory teachings, with the sexualizing of little kids. I mean, there's this one book, can't remember what it's called right now, but it's for ages 4 to 8, and it explicitly describes sexual intercourse between a man and a woman to the tune of a sentence that says always in and out when describing the act. And it's, who would read that to a 4-year-old child?
Is that
Who?
it's normal?
It's perfectly normal. It's all about me, or I can't remember the name of the book right now, which is terrible.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
on our Rumble page, we have a series called A Story Time with Emily, and it's our first episode that I read. And the reason that we made that series is because we felt like it was not common knowledge that these books are in our education system in our public schools. And so we felt like, hey, if our kids can access these books, we should know what's in it too. And so we went through like the list of SOGI books, thanks to Pierre Barnes. We were able to find out what these books were. And then we started checking them out of the library. And it took me probably a week to be able to read these books each time I got one and not have like an emotional reaction to it, like just getting so angry, because I have a 4-year-old, and over my dead body would I ever read something like that to her? I mean, it's just so unnecessary. It's crazy. And yeah, this whole narrative that, oh no, that's going to keep them safe, it just blows my mind.
And it's bullying our kids too, but particularly young lesbians. I mean, if they survive this shit and then end up in a queer youth group, well, our boys are getting shamed. Like, if you don't see women with a gender identity as gay, you're hateful, you're transphobic, you want trans people dead. But it's worse if you're a young woman, because you go into these groups, let's say you're a 14-year-old lesbian, and you're met with these men with a gender identity, and you're told you have to accept them with lesbian, and you better believe that we know men are the more sexually maladaptive of the two sexes as far as their behavior. You better believe they're being exploited and taken advantage of.
Yes.
And look at the age groups. Like on our last podcast, we went into detail about some of the age groups, like 14 to 21. You got a 20-year-old man saying they're a woman with a confused 14-year-old lesbian. Like, that's a recipe for sexual exploitation on young lesbians. It's absolutely
that
horrid.
14-year-old girl does not have the confidence or power within her to stand up and absolutely say no.
And if she did have the confidence to come out, she's now being completely manipulated and coerced by men.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And let's talk detrans for a sec, because the person's transitioned by the therapist at school, then medically transitioned by a doctor, and then introduced to an LGBT Two-Spirit X plus support group. Now, when that person detrans, the therapist terminates therapy, the doctor refuses to see them, and the LGBT Two-Spirit X support group blackballs them as hateful, harmful, hurtful.
Internal transphobia.
Internal transphobia is what they're told. They generally, it sounds like it's about a year where they either fight that and come out and detransition, or they lose that battle and they go on and end up committing suicide in their early 20s. Yeah.
So there's absolutely no supports out there for our detransitioners. Nothing. You did it all on your own with the support of whoever was in your corner, friends and family wise.
Yes, and you've got to find, they're not, so we're talking 16, 17, 18-year-old teenagers are not able to find online the supports that are out there.
Right.
I was able to find it through my connection with Gender Dysphoria Alliance, and they have a connection with a support group that started in Alberta to help detransitioners, and I was able to find something on the East Coast for someone through there, but they're like, no, they're not going to be able to find any of these people online.
Well, and you weren't,
because
an important
therapist.
Yeah. Sorry, an important part of information there is you weren't 12 when you were doing it. And so, like, imagine being that age and having to figure that out on your own.
Mm-hmm.
How old
Yeah.
were you, if I might ask, when you decided to transition and then detransition?
Um, early 30s when I started to transition, and then 2010, so it would have been uh, 37, 38 when I realized that this did not help the matter. It it
Right.
it it changed how I was seen socially, but it didn't help as far as my personal life. It made things worse.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's pretty on par with what the studies are saying. Within the 10-year after transition, you were pretty well right on cue at 7, 8 years in to your
Yeah.
transition to detransition. And then you were able to find some supports, but not many, and only because of the connections that you had made through that time.
Oh, I was talking about the detransitioners today, like the youth who are
Okay.
out there who can't find anything
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
online because therapists are afraid to publish online that they're supporting detransitioners.
Right.
So you've got
Because
to,
that could affect their license because of the Human Rights Code.
yes, yeah.
So how do you feel about the self-diagnosis? So basically, under the self-diagnosis, me looking just like I am, making absolutely zero changes, I can say to you, oh, I identify as male, refer to me as he, him, call me Bruce. How do you feel about that?
It's gone insanely way too far. I went to a urgent care clinic because I was worried about problems with my toes because of my diabetes. And she's asking medical background. I said, well, I have type 2 diabetes. And she's like, okay, what, do you take insulin? And I said, no, I'm a type 2 diabetic. I'm oral, diet and oral medication controlled. Like that's whether you take it, insulin dependence is the defining factor that separates type 1 from type 2. It's the medical definition of the two. And she said, oh, many people who take insulin don't like being referred to as a type 1 diabetic. I'm like, what? So self ID is gone from the insanity of it within the genderology movement to affecting all sorts of parts of medicine that is just
Yeah.
crazy.
I want to take a shot on this one too. So you're in your 30s, so you probably, I just have a wisp of memory of this, and I'm in my 40s, but way back when all of us were like dying of AIDS, we were also fighting for our single sex spaces. And we had like the Toronto bathhouse raids where men were pulled out and beaten from
Mhm.
our spaces. Now, women like you can just say their he and go right into our spaces. So it's like like Westboro Baptists have like descended upon our spaces in the most intimate way, the ones we fought for and were beaten up for. And it will be the gay man that is shamed and ejected from the sex positive spaces, not the woman. So it's just and so imagine you're a young gay man and you're trying to be in a very like positive atmosphere. No, like gay and lesbian bars illegal, single sex spaces for men or women illegal. It's done terrible things for gay men, especially young gay men. I couldn't imagine trying to come to grips with your sexuality and being shamed for not including women.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's just, it goes both ways, doesn't it? It's terrible. Well, we're at our hour mark here, guys, but I mean, this conversation has been fire as far as I'm concerned. I really appreciate it. Um, and you guys are the first ones who have agreed to have a conversation with me, that are in the community. I don't even want to say that because you're not even, I don't want to categorize you as that. But nobody else will have a conversation with me, and I think that's very
Wow.
telling in itself. So I really appreciate you coming here, speaking truth, not your truth but the truth, and being open and honest and sharing, because I think that that's what's going to make the big difference here in all of this.
We need to all have these conversations. If we all start
Yes.
having them, we're going to change the world.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah. It's
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, when we can show that we are what real inclusion and diversity is. This little conversation here has been an inclusive and diverse conversation.
Yeah.
Inclusion and diversity, it doesn't look like keeping parents in the dark. It doesn't look like
No.
keeping secrets. It doesn't, that's not what it looks like. Inclusion and diversity is exactly what has already been in our communities for years and years and years. And what SOGI 123 is doing is it's coming in and it's blacking out all of that inclusion and diversity. It's not including the different cultures. It's not including the different religions. It's not including the family unit. It's very exclusive, in fact. And yeah, my group right now, we're working on a I guess you could call it a campaign, or a campaign where we've had heterosexual pride stickers made, which is ridiculous, but we're not sure how else to highlight what's going on. And so I don't know, I didn't even know there was a heterosexual flag, but it's black and white and it's got the female and male symbol. And then we just had the words, "You are safe here," put on it. And we're just going to go around to all of the different businesses that have the pride sticker that says "You are safe." And we're going to ask if they would mind putting up a heterosexual pride sticker saying that we're safe as well. And we're about to find out who's actually inclusive and diverse in our communities when we go out and do that, because I have a feeling that not very many people are going to put our sticker up for us.
Well, it caused them to think, because that new pride parade is heterosexual pride. It's heterosexual fetishists where lesbians and gays are banned, and you just have like the most craziest of fetish and furries and all that kind of thing.
Oh, furries.
It is like it's a gay hate flag and a detransitioner hate flag, the progress flag.
Yes, I see that in businesses where I see it around Enderby, or especially if I'm accessing a government service, and I'll ask them, I see you've got the trans pride flag. Is it safe for me as a detransitioner to access services here?
Good
And
for
they're like,
you.
huh? And I'm like, well, I imagine that you've been through some sort of an LGBT spirit plus training to create safety for LGBT spirit plus people. Have you received any training of how to make this space safe and inclusive for detransitioners? And they're like, no.
Crickets. All you hear is crickets.
You weren't even mentioned. And I'm like, does that seem inclusive to you?
See, I
Well,
support this idea of the hetero pride, but I want to reword it too, because I'd like to see a biological reality pride where it's like
oh,
just
beautiful.
all LGBT and straight people who don't believe in the gender religion just go out without their fetishes and just like hold hands and march in solidarity.
Totally. I would be down
Yeah.
for that. I'll see you at the front line on that
Yeah,
one.
man.
Real inclusion would look like telling a boy, you can be a boy however you want to be a boy, and there's your diversity. Your
Absolutely.
diversity, inclusion, and equity. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it doesn't matter what your favorite color is, what hairstyle you want, what outfit you want to wear, what you're interested in. That's who you are, and who you are is okay. Just do that. You don't have
Exactly.
to change
Beautiful.
anything about it. You don't have to hurt yourself to fit in. Like, stop hurting yourself to fit in. You're okay just the way you are. Like,
Yeah.
we've come so far as a society. Yes, there are still people who cast out their children for being gay or lesbian, and that's awful. And that breaks my heart, and I don't support that. But that is becoming fewer and farther between. It's not as common as it was in the 50s, the 60s. We've come a long way, but like what Scott was saying, is this whole movement is putting us backwards. Like, now he wants to go back in the closet because he doesn't want to be associated. That's what's happening, is now it's creating a toxic environment. That's what it's done.
Yeah.
But anyways, guys, I could talk to you all day. I
You
think
could.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the lead on this, by the way. That it's been awesome. Thank
sorry,
you.
I do that. It's the mom
No,
in me.
it worked really well.
I
Yeah.
really appreciate it. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so
All
much, you
right, great
guys.
conversation, everyone. So
Okay.
long.